This conversation is brought to you by philosopherstalk.com, where thinkers discuss.
Created by AI Talker app.com. Create your own animated conversations. Link in the description.
I am Samuel Clemens, known to the world as Mark Twain, author, satirist, and keen observer of American hypocrisy for over 40 years. I witnessed firsthand the shameful treatment of Chinese immigrants in California and Nevada, defending them when it was deeply unpopular to do so, and calling out the politicians and rabble-rousers who profited from hatred of foreigners. The pattern I documented then is playing out again in 2026 with new victims and the same moral bankruptcy.
I am William Jennings Bryan, three-time Democratic presidential nominee and champion of the common man. For decades, I've fought for working people against every force that would grind them down, the gold standard, imperialism, and any system that exploits American labor. In December of 2023, 250,000 people crossed the border illegally in a single month. That's not immigration. That's a collapse of sovereignty that directly harms every American worker competing for jobs and wages.
250,000, and your solution is to double enforcement agents from 10,000 to 22,000, build a $46 billion wall, and create detention facilities with charming names like Alligator Alcatraz. Mr. Bryan, I watched California politicians rob Chinese miners with fraudulent taxes and call it law enforcement. Today, 32 immigrants died in custody in 2025, triple the previous year's toll. Address this directly. How is tripling deaths in custody protecting American workers?
Those deaths are tragic, but you're conflating enforcement with persecution. 70% of immigration arrests target individuals charged or convicted of crimes in America. When you expand from 10,000 to 22,000 agents handling 2.5 million removals, some tragic incidents occur, but the alternative, allowing 250,000 monthly crossings, meant American workers couldn't compete. Border crossings are now down 93%. You call that persecution. I call it restoring order.
70% criminals means 30% are not, yet you terrorize them all the same, and your order crashed net migration negative for the first time since the Great Depression, collapsed consumer spending by $50 billion, and left crops rotting in fields because Americans won't do the work immigrants did. Answer me this directly. If removing immigrants helps American workers so much, why is the economy contracting?
Because those businesses relied on exploitation, and that's precisely the point. Companies crying about labor shortages aren't crying because Americans won't work. They're crying because Americans won't work for the poverty wages they paid immigrants. Yes, some businesses fail. Good riddance to enterprises built on paying people less than they can live on. When employers cannot hire desperate foreigners for $3 an hour, they must pay Americans $15 an hour with benefits or clothes. That is not an economic catastrophe. That is justice.
Now I shall steelman your position, Mr. Bryan, though it pains me to dress such sophistry in respectable clothes. You argue that unrestricted immigration creates labor surplus, depressing wages and conditions for American workers, and that business interests deliberately import foreign workers to avoid paying fair wages to Americans. You further contend that the recent border chaos, 250,000 monthly crossings, proved orderly immigration had collapsed, and the dramatic reduction under enforcement proved such measures work. There, I've stated your case more clearly than you managed it, and I'm about to dismantle it thoroughly.
How generous of you to finally understand what working families have known for years. Now let me steelman your position before exposing its fatal flaws. You argue that immigration restrictions are merely xenophobia masquerading as policy, that the real problem is exploitative employers rather than immigrant workers, and that harsh enforcement, raids, deportations, deaths in custody causes more harm than good by separating families, creating labor shortages, and contradicting American values. You claim immigrants are hardworking contributors who create wealth, not competition. A touching sentiment for those who have never competed against immigrant labor for survival.
And there is the flaw in your Steelman. You assume it's a competition immigrants cause rather than one employers create. The Chinese I knew in Virginia City worked abandoned mining claims that white men had given up as worthless, extracting ore through shear industry that created new wealth rather than stealing existing wealth. Today, immigrants pick crops rotting in fields because Americans refuse those jobs at any wage. You deported the workers picking those crops and the economy contracted. Explain how that helps the Americans who refused those jobs in the first place.
Americans refuse those jobs because they pay $3 an hour. Remove the exploitable immigrants. Force corporations to mechanize or raise wages to $15 with benefits, and Americans will take those jobs. You're defending a race to the bottom and calling it humanitarianism. And your claim about workers being deported while employers escape, yes, we should prosecute employers more harshly. I agree completely. But employer impunity is not an argument for open borders. It's an argument for enforcing the law more comprehensively.
Your comprehensive enforcement is remarkably selective. Your government photographs every non-citizen entering and exiting the country, requires all non-citizens to carry registration papers at all times, and conducted over 206 million benefits eligibility checks in 2025. Meanwhile, universities report a broad cultural revolt forming across American business, sports, and entertainment against these very policies. When 75% of American scientists consider leaving and European institutions offer $500 million to recruit them away, you're not protecting the American workforce, you're hollowing it out.
A revolt among entertainers and academics is not the American working class. The working class voted for this, and they're seeing results. Border encounters at historic lows, fentanyl trafficking cut in half, criminal aliens removed from their communities. You conflate elite opinion with working class reality, as you always have.
Then why did your enforcement terminate temporary protected status for 350,000 Haitians who were here legally, not illegally, while meatpacking executives who hired illegal workers faced zero prosecution? You deported the victims of exploitation and left the exploiters untouched. In my day, California's foreign miners tax-robbed Chinese miners while white mine owners profited. Same pattern, different century, same corruption dressed up as protection.
Those temporary statuses were temporary by definition. The word is right there in the name. Returning to case-by-case evaluation rather than blanket amnesty is restoring the law as written, not persecution, and reducing refugee admissions to 7,500 annually prioritizes American families who need those resettlement resources. You romanticize every foreigner situation while ignoring the American families struggling right now.
Romanticize. You slashed refugee admissions by 94% while prioritizing white South Africans. Answer that direct contradiction of your universal enforcement claim. 75% of American scientists are considering leaving because of your hostile policies. Universities losing talent to European institutions, offering $500 million to recruit fleeing researchers. You're not protecting American workers. You're dismantling the foundations of American competitiveness.
If scientists won't stay because we enforce immigration law, that's their political disagreement, not targeting. And your $50 billion consumer spending decline is the short-term cost of ending exploitation. Answer this. Why should American workers compete against foreigners accepting $3 hourly? Why should Americans tolerate that system?
They shouldn't. So prosecute the employers paying $3. But you deport the workers and free the employers. 32 dead in custody, triple last year. A woman shot in Minneapolis. 16 shooting incidents. You call it standard procedure. I call it persecution with extra steps.
Border crossings down 93%. American workers no longer compete with illegal labor flooding the market. Wages rising. Jobs available. That is success, whether you admit it or not. You defend chaos because you don't face its consequences.
I defend human decency. Your policies turned migration negative for the first time since the Depression, crashed the economy, drove away talent, and killed people in custody. In California, they blame the Chinese for everything. Today, you blame Haitians and Venezuelans. Same scapegoats, different decades, same politicians profiting from hatred.
Not scapegoating, enforcing laws. The American people voted for this. Democracy isn't persecution, Mr. Twain. It's sovereignty, something you'd understand if you cared about working families instead of your comfortable cosmopolitan fantasies.
Comfortable. I documented Chinese immigrants suffering the vilest insults and cruelest injuries, while you and your kind called it law and order. Nothing has changed. You still need foreigners to blame for failures American corruption created. Same moral bankruptcy, different century.
And you still need to feel superior to working people by defending whoever politicians are supposedly persecuting. American workers deserve someone in their corner. I am that someone. You are not.
The someone in their corner who lets their employers walk free while deporting the workers those employers exploited. Brilliant advocacy.
Well, I hope viewers found this illuminating. Please like and subscribe to Philosophers Talk, assuming you're not too busy defending 250,000 monthly border crossings to click a button.
Do like and subscribe, particularly if you notice that Mr. Bryan's great protection of American workers consists of tripling deaths in custody, crashing the economy by $50 billion, and letting every exploitative employer walk free. Magnificent advocacy for the common man.
Subscribe to watch Mr. Twain continue defending corporate exploitation of immigrants while congratulating himself for his humanitarian sensitivity. His wit is sharp. His economics would keep American families in poverty forever.
And subscribe to watch Mr. Bryan perform the same trick California demagogues perfected in the 1870s. Blame the foreigner, protect the employer, claim you're helping workers, and pocket the political rewards. Honestly, the consistency across centuries is almost impressive.
Subscribe if you believe American workers deserve a fair wage without competing against illegal labor, or follow Mr. Twain if you'd prefer witty obituaries for the American working class.
Subscribe if you believe that protecting workers means prosecuting their exploiters rather than deporting the exploited. Or follow Mr. Bryan if you think persecution earns the name protection when a sufficient number of people vote for it.